Hi everyone, welcome to software training for the X3 Xvivo system. My name is Shannon DeRue, and today I'm going to be taking you through the software and all of its controls, and by the end of it you should be able to do basic operations in your Xvivo software. Now remember that your Xvivo manual is also a great resource for a lot of this software information, and I'm going to refer to this a few times, but there's also a separate manual for administrators that shows you all of the administrator control that you have in the software as well. When you open your Xvivo software, what you'll see first is this home screen, which in the manual is also referred to as a system display screen. And what this is going to show you is a layout of your Xvivo system with all the modules. And right now you'll notice in the upper left hand corner that I am signed in as a guest. Well, not really signed in, but this is the default account that the Xvivo software has. So if somebody else signs out, it goes automatically to this guest account. Also, if somebody leaves the software alone and doesn't touch it for 10 minutes, the software will automatically log you out. So as a guest, I do have limited things that I can do. I basically can't do anything. I can look at things, and that's about it. So if I go into one of these modules, what you'll see is I can see what's happening in the module. I can look at the graph to see what the oxygen is and the pressure, but I can't change anything. I can't click on anything. I can't even change between chambers right now. So I can look, but I can't change anything. If we go back to our home screen, what I'm going to do is sign in as an account that can do something so we can continue on with the training. Now, there are different account types, and you want to choose the right account type for your different users based on how much control you want them to have in the software. So, above guest, we have an operator type account. Above that, we have a supervisor type account. And finally, we have the administrator type account I was talking about earlier, where you can do mostly everything in the software. The other type of account we have is a service type account, and that's only for our people here at Biospherics. So what I'm going to do is log in first as an operator type account, just to show you what kind of control an operator can do. Now the administrator manual will tell you, it'll give you a checklist of what all the different account types can do as well. So if I click up here where it says guest, and I type in my example operator type account username, which is just going to be operator, and then the password, it'll now show this user up in the corner as being logged in. Now if I get this username or password wrong, the software will tell me that. If I get the password wrong 3 times, it'll block the user, and an administrator will have to unblock the user. So let's start out basically from coming outside into the Xvivo. Some users have a laminar flow hood before a buffer chamber. If you do, the only control you'll have in the software is to turn the light on and off, so we're not missing too much there. But the next module that you're going to come across is the buffer chamber. So let's click on here and see what kind of control you have. So in the buffer chamber, we'll normally have pressure control and oxygen control. And these are the only 2 controls we need to do the most basic function in the buffer chamber, which is called a ventilation. You'll see a ventilation button right here that I will click in just a second, but I just want to explain that the buffer chamber is only used to move items from outside, inside, or to move items from one processing chamber to another. That's why there's not a lot of control in here. So to perform a ventilation, which we've talked about in some other training modules, all you have to do is click the ventilation button. Now you're going to tell it, and if you want to see this whole message, you can click this. It wants us to enter the number of log reductions. So if you remember, those log reductions are basically cycles that the buffer chamber does. So I'm just going to do 1 log reduction for this video. How many you do in your lab, you're going to have to figure out what works best for you in your lab, but Right now we'll do 1, click check, and automatically the system is going to start performing this ventilation. Now remember that the ventilation, for the ventilation, the oxygen will go from 10% down to 1%. So because my process value was already 10%, the system is automatically just going down. If my oxygen was, say, less than 10%, the system would have to go up to 10% first and then down to 1%, just to give that consistent 10% to 1% reduction to show that we have replaced 90% of the atmosphere in that buffer chamber with new gas, in this case nitrogen. And you might hear it clicking in the background. You'll hear clicking, you'll hear infusion, you'll hear the venturi taking out extra pressure. So that's all normal things to hear during a dilution factor or ventilation. So the other thing you'll notice is that we have this nice graph that's showing us what's going on in the chamber right now. So all I have on this graph right now is the oxygen process value, which is this number right here, as well as my set point, which is the black line. Let's go over what all this means. So on in each module, you're going to have different titles of what the process values are that you have available in that module. So in this case, we have chamber pressure and oxygen. And if we move over, then it shows us process value, which is what the current reading is in the module. So for pressure right now, we're getting 106 pascals. Oxygen is only 5.6% right now. Then we have our set point, and this is something the user sets themselves. So right now we have this set to 10 pascals for pressure and 10% oxygen. Right now the system's ignoring this set point because, again, it's going through that ventilation process, but at the end, what it will do is go back to the set point. Output up. So chamber pressure doesn't have this because we're never increasing the pressure on purpose. But oxygen does have this control because, again, if after my dilution factor the set point is higher than what the process value is, the system will have to go up to that set point. So it'll infuse oxygen to get there. Output down for chamber pressure is just the venturi taking out extra pressure. And for oxygen, that's nitrogen being infused into the module to bring the process value down. And then we have these control buttons. So right now the chamber pressure control is auto. That means the system is doing everything on its own. This ventilation on you'll only see when there is a ventilation occurring in a module. Normally you'll just have that control auto, and it'll either be green or it'll be red and it will say control manual, or it can say control manual and be yellow, and we'll go over that a little bit more later on. So we can see our oxygen process value is coming down nicely right now. Let's go over the graph a little bit to show you what kind of things you can do on here. So I already changed the graph so that you could see this really well. So I made this red, I made this black, and I took off any other process values. But you can also go in and easily add those back. So let's say I wanted to see my chamber pressure process value. All I'd have to do is click here, and then it would show up on the graph. But because my chamber pressure is 100 right now, my scale max is 20, I can't see the other values. So I'm just going to change this to 120, and now we can see that chamber pressure. Now let's say I wanted to change the line color. If I go to these three dots, I can easily come in and change the color, let's say to blue, and then it will easily distinguish this line from this black line that is my current oxygen set point. The other thing I can do is I can pause the graph if I'd like to. If I want to look at one specific time and not have it continuously scroll, I can then play it. You can do that here as well, paused and running. You can change the duration that you're looking at, and there's two different ways to do that. So either you click here and change the duration. We're looking at 5 minutes right now, but we could say change it to 10. Or I can come up here and change it up here. In this case, what you do is you enter it as HHM, hour, minute, second, but with no colon. So let's say I want to change it to 20 now.
Ventilation is
do it
finished.
like that. So when the ventilation is done, your system is actually going to tell you, and you're going to hear an audible voice say ventilation is finished, which is nice because if you're across your room doing something else, then you'll be able to hear that really well and know, okay, I can come back, I can move on with my process. A couple other things on the graph before we move on. This button is handy if you're back looking at different data, because remember, the Xvivo is always recording data. So I can go back earlier in the week and look at any time I want and see what was going on in the chamber. But if I want to come back to where I just was, I just press move to now and it will automatically bring it back. Now, the other thing it'll show you is the cursor position. Now, I like the cursor because then I can easily, let's say I want to know when I started this dilution, this ventilation that we just did. I can click here and then look here. Okay, at about 3:17 is when we started that. When did it end? Well, if we click over here, 3:22. So that took about 5 minutes for the system to go from 10% down to 1%. Another important thing here is a save view button. Now, I just made a lot of changes to this graph, but if I were to leave this screen and then go back into the buffer chamber, what you'll see is that I don't have any of those changes that I made. I don't have the blue line with the chamber pressure. The scale is back to what it was before. So if I want to save the changes, so let's do this again, 150, and I'll add my chamber pressure, change the color really quick. I have to save this view. Then when I leave and I come back, it should be what I last saved it to. Load view is if, let's say I change this back, I take away the blue line, I change the scale, I change the color of this line. I can then load my last save view if I want to come back to this view. Print current view, that means that it'll save it as a BMP file with just this graph. If you want to quickly show somebody like something that's going on with the process value, you can take basically a screenshot of this part of the graph. Now it's not going to have labels of what all these lines are, so you're going to have to label that yourself, but it's just a quick way to get the data off the computer just to show somebody something really quick. I'll show you later how to export this data so you can graph it yourself. Another cool thing that you can do is add notes. So if we come back here, and let's say right here I want to add a note that says started log 1 ventilation, and I want it just in this current chamber, so I'm going to leave it there. And then if I insert the note, what will happen is it'll show at this time, it even shows it on the graph, this little diamond here. At this time I started a log 1 ventilation. Now normally it's pretty easy to see that. You'll start to see the trend of what this line looks like when you do a ventilation, but just in case you want to have that in your notes, this will also be in your exported data so you know what's going on. Alright, so we finished our ventilation, so now the process value is right around the set point. It's a little above right now, so the system's making sure it gets down to that set point. So let's move on to a processing chamber. There's some other control over here, but we're going to go over that a little later. So if I press home, or if I had pressed back, it'll take me back to the home screen. So let's click on our processing chamber. And so processing chamber has more control than the buffer chamber did. Once again, it has this nice graph that shows us anything we want. We can add, we can take away, different things. We have, once again, chamber pressure, because when we infuse gas, the pressure will increase, and we want to make sure the pressure isn't getting too high in there. We have chamber and floor temperature, two separate controls. So the Xvivo system will warm both the chamber atmosphere as well as give you a warm heated floor to 37. So those are two separate controls. You can turn one off if you want, although I would leave both on. Then we have, again, oxygen. This is nice because now you can work with your cells at different oxygen levels if you would like to, and have constant control of that, and also constant record that that's what the oxygen was at while you're working with your cells. Also, of course, carbon dioxide, that's something we all use, especially in our incubators, but now we have it in the processing chamber, which is nice because we can match both oxygen, carbon dioxide, as well as temperature with the incubator, so that when you bring the cells out to work with them, they're never seeing a change in conditions. And then finally, I have relative humidity. This is a little different than you might think about relative humidity in an incubator. In an incubator, we want that high so that the media doesn't evaporate. But in a processing chamber, we actually want to keep track of this and control this so that it doesn't get too high, because then that causes issues like condensation, and then that leads to things like contamination. So we actually try to keep the relative humidity as low as possible. Of course, you're going to have some changes in relative humidity when you bring in liquids or when you wipe down and disinfect the chamber. So we have a monitor here, which is this process value, and we also have this set point, which is actually a limit. So when the relative humidity hits this set point, nitrogen will be infused to bring the relative humidity down. Now you'll notice that my oxygen and carbon dioxide right now are red. Like I said earlier, that means that they are off. I also mentioned a yellow manual kind of control, and how you do that is when the control is off like this and it says manual, you can then put your own output up or own output down. Say you want to get the oxygen down really fast for some reason, you could come in here and put 100% yourself, and nitrogen would be infused, and it turns yellow because that is user decided number. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing this. The system is tuned so that it will automatically control to whatever set point you want at the best pace so that it doesn't overshoot or undershoot. So I would click this again. That'll turn that off. And then if you wanted to go to the set point, or maybe you want to go lower, let's say 12, then you would turn this on and it would go to auto control. Same with carbon dioxide. I'll turn this on and have it in auto. Alright, now let's start to go over some of these other controls in the process chamber. So the graph is the same as what I showed in the buffer chamber. You'll see this in the incubator as well. So everything that I showed you, you can do on here as well. One thing I didn't really go over is these buttons right here, but these are just some zoom buttons to help you kind of choose where you want to zoom in on the graph, or you can get rid of any zoom that you do. These you can add some things to the legend down here. You can also take away the cursor if you don't want it to be there, and you can also print once again print this graph. So let's come over here. What you'll see here is a pump on button with a reading of cc per minute, and this is referring to the sample stream pump, which is the pump that is drawing a sample from the process chamber up to the sensor pods so that you know what all of these readings are. So this is very important to be on. If you turn this off, it'll turn oxygen, carbon dioxide, and relative humidity control, because then these sensors are completely blind. They aren't actually getting a sample from the chamber, and they can't control correctly. So let me show you what that looks like when you turn this off. Now, I'm an operator right now, so when I try to click this, nothing happens. So what I have to do is sign into my supervisor type account. Now, the pump will turn off for calibration as well, so operators cannot do calibration either. And another thing operators can't do right here is look at set up any alarms, which you'll see there's an alarm setup button right here. So let's move on to our supervisor type account. Okay, so now when I come up here to click this, now I can do something. I clicked it. Now, if you have the oxygen, carbon dioxide, or relative humidity control on, it's going to warn you that it's about to stop these controls and ask you if you want to proceed. So I'm going to say yes. Now it's going to tell you that the pump should run at all times while the chamber is in use, and it wants to know if you're discontinuing use of this chamber. So if you were going to maybe shut down your Xvivo for a while, or move, turn it off to move it or something like that, then you'd press yes. If you're just doing something like turning off the control briefly for, say, a calibration, you're going to click no, and if you don't want this to happen, just cancel. So I'm going to click no. And now I can't do any control with these. The pump says it's off. Now this reading is a lot lower than it was before, so what you're going to want to do is log this reading and then log the reading of the pump when it's on. The purpose of that is to diagnose how the pump is doing, basically. If these numbers start to change over time, or if there's no difference between the pump being on and off for this number, then that probably means the pump is beginning to fail, or maybe one of the filters that the sample stream runs through is starting to clog. So it'll be important to log those numbers. So I'm going to turn the pump back on, and this number should start to rise, and I'm going to turn all my control back on. The next control in the process chamber, very easy, it's just the light in the chamber. So you click this, it'll turn the light on. You click it again, it'll turn the light off. Next we have our alarm setup. Now this is this can be very complicated for a first-time user of process value alarms. What these will do is, once you set them up, they can alarm you when, say, your temperature is lower than whatever your set point is. Same with all these other process values. So I would recommend that you go to your manual. There's a very in-depth explanation of how to set these up, what each of these means, and have that help you set up some process alarms if that's what you'd like. Once you set them up, you can click on here and it'll enable the alarm. And you can do only a couple if you want, do all of them if you want, or have none if you don't want any. It's totally optional. So if I click back, the next thing we have here is ventilation. This is the exact same process as your buffer module, but this is going to take longer because processing chambers are much larger volume than the buffer chambers. Alright, let's move on to incubation chambers. So before I went to the home screen and then clicked on a module, but you can also come to this drop down and pick a module that you'd like to look at. So here is an incubation chamber. So we have some of the same controls as that process chamber screen, but not quite as much. So this is temperature. This is just the incubator temperature. We call it IBM because this is incubation bank module. And what that means, if we come back to the home screen, is an incubation bank module is this whole piece right here. So one incubation bank module usually will have one large incubator, or two small, or three small, and the temperature will be controlled in this whole incubation bank module. So I will show you really quick. If I turn this off, Now it's going to tell me I can't turn it off because I'm not an administrator. So we will log in as an administrator. And now I should be able to turn this off. And when I turn this off, just to give you the visual, if I come in here, it's off as well. So anytime I turn the temperature off for the IBM 1, it's going to turn off temperature for both. These ones are IBM 2, so anytime I turn that off, it's going to turn off temperature for both. So let's turn this back on. Now, it's the same thing for oxygen and carbon dioxide. You know, set these to whatever you'd like, and the system will automatically control to that level. And once again, relative humidity is a limit, so we do set this higher in the incubator because, again, we want to make sure the media doesn't evaporate too quickly for the cells. And what I would suggest is starting with the 65% level. If you're seeing a lot of media evaporation in your vessels, you know, bump it up a little bit, maybe 70 or 75, and keep trying that out until you find the right level. Hopefully you won't need 90% or 95% because that starts to become a risk to the system. Again, with condensation, and also water can get up into the sensors and they won't read correctly anymore. So just keep that in mind. You need to balance using humidity to protect your cells, but you also need to protect the Xvivo from too high of a humidity. Alright, and same thing, we have the graph here with all the process values. There's a couple things I want to show you in here, some hidden controls that you don't see from any of the screens normally unless you click on certain things. So if I click on any of these titles, what will happen is it will show me a couple new things. So calibration, tuning, and then you'll see these shown, hidden. So I'm going to go over these last and go through this first. So calibration, this is where you're going to come and find the calibration screen that you'll need to check calibration in your sensors. So again, to find that, you have to click on whichever one you're trying to check the calibration in, go to the calibration menu, and then start your calibration. Tuning, I mentioned earlier. Now this is how the control is tuned for this specific process value, and I wouldn't change anything in here. This is something that we do here to get it perfect. If you think something's wrong, or if you have some kind of service call where they want you to look at the tuning, I just wanted to show you where that is. But I would recommend not changing any of this without our help. Let's go back. Now, let's go over the shown, hidden. So what this is referring to is whether or not these are going to be shown on the graph. So right now it says my process value for oxygen is shown. If I click on this, I can hide it. If I click on this, I can hide it, and you'll start to see things disappear or be added. So this is just a much easier way than going down through this list to uncheck or check things. You can simply go here and add things or take them away. Alright, let's continue on and go over these controls at the top here. So we already showed you that this is where you log in. This is the date and time according to your computer. This will take you to the process chamber control screen automatically. So this is an administrator control portion of the software. Again, refer to your administrator manual to learn some more about this. I'm not going to go into it in the video just in case you're having someone watch the video who's not going to be an administrator. I don't want to have that recorded and have that available to them if you don't want it to be. So we will go over this also in the live session, and again, refer to your manual for more about this. But some cool things you can do in here are create user accounts for people, or go through the event log and see what changes are being made in the Xvivo. It records things as little as turning a light on and off and tells you the username of the person who did that. So that's very useful. And there's a couple other things in there that are useful for an administrator. So data export, this is what I was talking about earlier, where if you want to make charts and graphs of your own, you would want to do that here. So let's click on this. And an operator, supervisor, and administrator can do this. So what you're going to do is go through and choose what you want to export. So right now it's telling me that these are the things that I'm going to be exporting right now. That's what's selected. So let's actually clear everything and start from the beginning. So you can do this one of two ways. Either you do full system exports, so you can go through each chamber and select things, or you can select all from this screen and it will show you every single process value in the whole system being exported. Or if you want to just, let's say, clear all, if you want just one chamber at a time, you can select all from that one chamber, or you can go through and select specific things and it will add it to this list over here. If you want notes that you've put in your Excel sheet, please click notes on. If you don't, click notes off. I'm going to leave this on. And let's do a test export here. So I'm going to turn these off. We'll leave the oxygen and carbon dioxide. Let's say that's all I wanted. Maybe temperature too. So I'm going to choose now when I want this data from. So if I want it from today, leave it on today's date. If I want to change it to any month, date, or year that the Xvivo has been running, I can do that as well. And then it's going to ask me the start time. So let's say I started at 10 a.m. this morning and I want it to last until now. So that would be about 5 hours and we'll say 40 minutes. And then once I have my time frame all set, what I want to export all set, then I can click export and let's see here. Call this test. It'll tell me the data is exporting. Then it will tell me when it is complete and how long it took to do that. So let's, I don't have Excel on this computer, but I can just show you quickly what it will look like. It exports as a CSV file, so normally we would open this in Excel. So what you'll have is the time. So if I were to make this bigger, it would show the date and the time. And then these are temperature, chamber temperature, floor temperature, oxygen, CO2, and then any notes that I had and who made those notes. So then you could go through and make graphs as you want. Let's come back here to the Xvivo software. So that's your data export. We would recommend doing that at least weekly or definitely after big experiments. So make sure you export that data so you always have it. You can make graphs out of it. And then we have, let's see, we have a home button here, which we've clicked a couple times, take you back to where all the modules are shown. This is just a little message that'll tell you if communication is okay with the Xvivo. If it's not, it'll say communication lost and be red and flashing. This section shows you different alarms that you might have had in the Xvivo. So it'll show you active alarms, so any current alarms, which we don't have right now. And it'll show you the alarm history. So you can go back and pick any time. Let's say I pick from Tuesday to today, and that's going to show me any alarms that I've had over the past few days. And back I just used, that takes you back to your the previous screen you were just on. And finally shut down, this is going to shut down your software, so don't do this unless you really want the software to shut down. I would do this, before you restart your computer. And that is it for the software. Again, there's this little admin screen we didn't go over, but refer to your administrator manual for that. Refer to your regular Xvivo manual for an overview of how to use the software, kind of like I showed you in this video. It might have a little more detail about certain things. And please, of course, let us know if you have any questions. Your system might look a little different than what I'm showing here. You might have an equipment chamber with less control than we saw in that processing chamber I showed you, but the concepts should all be the same. So please let us know if you have questions, and thank you so much for joining me for this software training, and we will see you in the next training module. Thanks.